Back to Redefine Parenting with your host, Veenu Keller. We want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and H.E.R Network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Zingo TV is a free app that can be downloaded on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Redefine Parenting is a revolutionary approach to nurturing our children. Veenu will bring you live experts, transformative insights, and a fresh perspective, all aimed at helping families worldwide truly understand their children. Together, let's give them a childhood they won't have to heal from. Hello and welcome back again. I am so excited to have my mentor, a dear friend of mine, Steve Linder, join us to talk about something that him and I are both passionate about. And it's really about understanding mental illness in children. And is it really mental illness, or what is the cause of it? What if we get to the cause? And, you know, I've studied with Steve many years ago in neurolinguistic programming and got certified in his program. And one of the things that made me who I am today, to really help people get sustainable changes within themselves and with their children, is one concept that Steve taught me. Instead of living at the effects of everything, like our kids cutting, our kids yelling at us, our kids not performing at the level we want, we're constantly looking at how do we solve that? How do we make our kids better? How do we get our kids to focus more, listen more? And Steve said one thing. He says, if we can get to the cause and shift that, then anything is possible, and we can have the sustainable changes that we want to see in our children. And because of that, I was not working with families and kids at that time, but I was working on my own self. I was looking at myself, as one of my mentors, Joseph McClendon III, says, physician, heal thyself. So when I took Steve's courses, I was actually looking at how could I make myself a better person? And in turn, I didn't know this was going to be the journey I'm on. And now I use that same concept with the families that I'm so privileged to work with. So without further ado, Steve, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just dive in, because you are the one who really, like I said, had really sparked that, because I think most families are always looking at what's wrong with their children and how do we fix it.
I think it's not just looking at even what's wrong with their children, but I think sometimes it's a matter of the kids looking at what's wrong with me. And so a lot of times when there's what's called the presupposition of an identity, if I've seen kids where say they're dyslexic, and so, and granted there are different varying forms of dyslexia, and I would see parents where they would say, you know, here's my son, he's dyslexic, and I'd watch the son's just attitude change right there. And I was noticing what was going on in terms of how he was processing. And so I had him spell relatively simple words, and this is going back almost 20 years ago now. And I asked him to spell a very simple word, and he wasn't able to get it, but I was watching how he was spelling. He was what's called a kinesthetic speller. He was trying to feel out the words. And so I showed him how to go into more of a visual state, basically see a word visually in his visual recall, see it, and then have a blank card, have him see the word again, and then spell it. And within no time, he was spelling words that he could not spell before. He was actually getting cheeky. And I think his big word, I think, was manufacturing, which is, you know, for a 6-year-old was a pretty big word for him, especially being that he couldn't even spell the word earth about 20 minutes, you know, earlier when I first met him.
Oh, wow.
And so I look at it that sometimes with as parents, what needs to happen is we need to look at what identity do we hold for our kids. And this is whether you have kids or whether even you're raising other people's adult children, if you're a leader of an organization. I come from a big corporate background as well. And I realized that the strongest force, obviously, in the human nervous system is to be consistent with your identity, but also remembering that people will only rise to your level of your expectation of them. And I see a lot of parents where they have kids that sometimes that are adopted or kids that have behavioral challenges. And if I look at just the child, so you have to look at the ecology, you have to look at the environment. And so you may have a young person that, say, is looking like this, and the parents will adapt to them. And then you help that child expand. You help them, you know, basically be better, do better, and so on. But when they go back to the same environment, they'll basically start, well, no, you haven't really changed. It's not going to last. And guess what? They'll mold them right back into what they know and what they hold certain. So hopefully you're taking notes if you're watching this. Remember what expectation you hold for all children, including your inner kid as well. Because if you think, oh, well, I'm not a good mom, I'm not a good dad, it's because of my background, because of my race, because of this or because of that, whatever story we tell ourselves, that reinforces oftentimes a limiting identity. And again, we only rise as a society, we only rise to the level of our expectations that are put on us by ourselves or by other people. So as parents, instead of looking at why is my kid this way, we want to look at how is my kid doing this? What's the structure? What's what we call the neurostrategy? And it's really it's an amazing thing to see parents where, case in point, when sorry, I don't mean to be so verbose here. There was a young man that had been stuttering his entire life. He was about 13 years old, tons of therapy, some of the world's best doctors, and he was referred to me, and it was I think 5 hours, and he went to where he was speaking smoothly and flawlessly, and there were no medications, no ongoing therapy. It was just literally him realizing, oh, I'm not broken. I need to use these strategies to get a different result, and the parents to realize my child wasn't really a stutterer. My child used to stutter. Basically, my child is still, we'll call him Johnny, and Johnny used to run this one particular pattern. So
I love
it's helping.
I love that,
That's the
Steve.
first step.
I love that because you're telling the parents not to make their child the identity of the issue at hand. It's you have your
Yes.
child as an identity and they are having this challenge or issue or what have you. And I love that because my tagline is give children a childhood they won't have to heal from.
Yes.
And and I feel like this concept of what you're introducing to our audience tonight is exactly that. If we can have an identity for our children that holds them to their greatness versus holds them to our greatness, our expectations of what we think we need them to be. We're going to be
Exactly.
we're going to be dealing with a whole different realm of children actually. Like these kids will not have to heal themselves. I'll tell you, I had a client and well, I have many clients, but this one particular, she was saying that she wanted to be a lawyer. And her parents
Hmm.
were adamant, no, she has to be a doctor. She has to be a doctor. And they couldn't understand why she was staying in a room. She didn't talk to them. They called her depressed
Yep.
and had a lot of anxiety. So here I'm coaching her. And what I'm finding out is she's not depressed by the clinical terms. And I'm not a doctor, but I've studied this enough in my degree. And
Hmm.
she wasn't clinically anxious either. What was happening is she didn't know how to be good enough for her parents because she was not meeting their expectations of wanting to be a doctor. And she had to close her own voice to them, if you would, because she dare not say, I want to be a lawyer because they were like, no, you're going to be a doctor.
And I think the real question also is, I mean, if we could like channel ourselves into the mind of a young person with parents that are saying that, is to say, okay, me being a doctor, what will that mean for you?
Right.
And maybe if you're a parent watching this, if you find yourself thinking, oh my gosh, I'm kind of trying to force my son or my daughter into some particular profession, you have to ask yourself, for what outcome? And the reason being, and for me, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was not the best kid in school, mainly because I wasn't really challenged. And I went and I first thought I'm going to be an architect, and then they saw my printing and they thought, he'll be good at doing foundations and stairwells. I thought, oh my gosh, no. So but I had my dream. I thought that's the one thing. And a lot of times people will latch on to anything. Why? Because it's something.
Right.
And only after I thought I stumbled into technology, and I thought, okay, I'm good at this. And sometimes we equate, or parents equate, or individuals, we all do. I'm good at it, so this must be what I'm meant to do. And I didn't realize that I didn't really enjoy it. And I got to the point where I went from sleeping on the floor because I wasn't salad bar team lead material to earning 30,000, 50,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year by the time I was 22, 23, and I realized I got to the top of the quote of the chain of the organization. I realized I'm an officer of a Fortune 100 company, and I'm not happy. And I found myself with our mutual friend Tony Robbins. I was going and volunteering weeks and weeks out of the year to go serve because that's what made me happy. And I was doing this crazy eight between earning the revenue so I can go do what I love, earning the revenue to do what I loved. And I realized I had to get clear on what makes me happy.
Right.
And I think a lot of times parents, we need to kind of put on that the curiosity hat of asking. This is what I ask people in Sometimes I ask people that are senior executives, and it somewhat freaks them out. I'll say, listen, if it all paid the same, you're a garbage person or you're the CEO of a Fortune 100, if it all paid the same, would you be doing anything different? And if they have to think about it, there's your sign. And so I think helping young people explore what makes them truly happy. And I've seen people, well, one particular individual, he said, well, I love making sports montage videos, but there's no money in that. It's so competitive out there. And I said, listen, if you do it and you really focus, and I walked them through a process I'll kind of describe if you want later on in terms of finding kind of your natural gift. He's now got 1.5, I think it's over 1.5 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. He's doing very, very well. And he's doing what he loves, though. And he's able to show up as a great father, as a great husband, and so on, versus him doing something just to make the money. And then he's miserable and he's not feeling that he's being present with his family because he's not really truly happy.
Right.
So
right.
I think it's giving them that freedom.
So I have a question for you, Steve, and I think that you'd be like the best one to answer this. So, I work with a lot of kids that sometimes feel that they have no purpose, like at 14, 15 years old. And some of them feel like life's not worth living anymore. So
Right.
How do you help a child? I like to hear, your response. How do you help a child at the age of 14 have a purpose to wake up every day, especially when they feel like they have friends? So it's not really like they're lonely. They have a love for sports. So they have something outside so everything that we talk about with kids, they have that. But there's something in them that just says, I'm just tired of living. Like I'm done. I'm done fighting the good fight.
Yeah. And it may be a combination of two things. Number one, they're operating inconsistent with their identity in terms of who they think they are as a person, or a career choice or what have you. It also may be that they've conditioned themselves, or they fooled themselves, as did I, into I should be in this type of role, or I should be focusing on this and trying to basically please everyone else while making yourself miserable. And that's where actually I'm going to see if I can share my screen just for a second here, if that's okay.
I don't know if you can. Oh, you can.
Can you see it there? Oh, I have a mix. I'll bring it. The tech geek is still well and alive inside me, so I'll show you that later.
Wow, this is pretty. I've never had a guest be able to share there.
Yeah. Well, I don't really like PowerPoint, but in a nutshell, so if we look at this, let's just say a lot of times, and instead of switching all the colors, I'm just gonna kind of stick with one here. If we look at a lot of kids, they are what we call creators or innovators. And so these are the kids, the young men and women, where their heads are in the clouds. They love innovating. They love creating new things. They have fantastical visions, and sometimes when we're kids, we all do that and we love it. But yet at times when we're doing that, what we're not that great at is basically execution. And so this is on the following through. This is where we're really well grounded. We've got a good sense of what needs to be done, of the when and the where and so on. And a lot of times when we are essentially we'll just call it this higher, so I'll switch this to a highlighter here, excuse me. When we're in this higher range over here, that looks like my profile is kind of like, like that I'm great at having the big ideas, and it helped me in my corporate life and so on, and do very well and start and sell companies. But I wasn't that great at execution. And so a lot of people, they're great at getting things done. And guess what? They don't feel they're that creative, and they make themselves wrong for it, or society makes them wrong for it. Or back to your earlier point, that you may have people that are just real people. They're just like basically, they're the life of the party. And they have phenomenal people skills. Like they can walk into a room and within 20 minutes, everybody in that room is completely their friend. Now, while they're great at the people skills, I'm sorry, that side for you guys, while they're great at the people skills, guess what? They're not going to be that great at the systems. And so other people, they're great at systems. They're great at the accounting. They're great at the office management and so on.
Right.
But their people skills are lacking. And so a lot of times I'll see both young people, especially nowadays, and a dear friend of mine, TJ, she uses technology. This is based on what's called I Ching, or sometimes it's been called wealth dynamics, talent dynamics, but she created this version for young people. And it's about helping kids realize that, okay, where's my natural flow? Where am I the happiest? And you might have somebody where they're right here. They're great at taking the big idea to the people and understanding people to create a big idea, but yet this is maybe their job or their career that mom and dad want, or they think that they want. And guess what? It's the exact opposite of what makes them
Happy.
happy. And so it's so frustrating at times. And granted, and I own this, that when I first started my practice 30 years ago now, down in the Beverly Hills, Los Angeles area, I was helping executives. Basically, they said, I want to be really good at this. And I helped them get really good at it and make a ton. And it worked. I got paid. But I didn't really serve. Only years later that I realized I didn't really serve them at the level I could have, because I was so busy, like a good parent, helping somebody be successful in what they said that they wanted. But I wasn't really helping them get clear on what they needed to be happy.
Right.
And so I think when you get to know your kids, or if you work with kids, or even the kid in all of us, even your peers or what have you, when you start to look at what makes you happy, and sometimes we were just talking the other day about meta programs, listen and see what's the theme of the person. We all know somebody that's maybe struggling right now, and listen and hear what's the source of their pain. Because if the source of their pain is, I'm alone and nobody wants to talk to me, I don't have any friends, and so on, if they're yearning for that, there may be a belief system of, I can't have friends, I shouldn't have friends, or I'm really good at math and that's all I'm going to be good at. I'm going to be focusing on one thing but then ignoring something else. It's really helping, really people in general, but especially young people, know that, hey, it sounds so trite, but you've got to focus on what makes your heart sing.
Right.
And then looking at, okay, how can we transform that in a way that adds value?
I think that a lot of kids, though, they don't understand what true happiness is for them.
Right.
A lot of us think
They adopt mom and dad's version of it, or the friends, or the social media's version of it.
Right.
Yeah, I have to do the fish lips on the yacht, but type of picture, type of thing, or what have you.
And I love what I've
Yeah.
heard you say this a lot in your classes, is that money doesn't buy you happiness, it buys you choices. And
Yes.
so for kids, when they see their friends with material things and they think that's happiness, or they see their friends with no boundaries, they think that's happiness. And I tell families all the time, I said, you need to give your kids boundaries, because boundaries make them feel
Yeah.
safe. Boundaries let them know you love them because you care about them. So
Yeah, and I'd even say, and I may get too in the weeds. Remember, I'm the guy behind the scenes, kind of helping train the thought leaders and their coaches and trainers and so on. And especially when I look at therapists now, like BetterHelp and things like that, there's a lot of different modalities out there that are all well and good. I look back at the structure of, okay, why are people doing it, and also what thinking systems are active. And a lot of times, back to your earlier point, we all have, and hear me on this, we all have multiple personalities. Many of us have multiple personalities that are arguing. Part of us wants to start a business. Part of us doesn't think that I can because I want to be with my family. Part of us thinks that we should go and give to the world, but part of me wants to achieve for myself. We all sometimes have this almost raging mob inside of us,
Right.
of conflicting wants and desires. And what I think, when people look at when they're happy, there's one thinking system that's driving, whether it's their survival, their tribal, their power god, their rules follower, achiever, socially conscious, integrated leader, and so on. And when they're unhappy, it's usually a different thinking system that takes over.
Mm.
And so helping people realize, and especially a lot of people, especially young people, when they're not good at something happens, they take it personally. If the parents are struggling in their relationship, in the finances, you look at what's going on in the Middle East. You look at, I've been on the phone all day today with the recent shooting in Maine, close to where I live, have a place in Maine. And it's interesting, they were talking about this individual who was saying, he was hearing voices in his head. Now, I'm not here to address, again, I'm not a licensed therapist, so I can't address specifically his psychopathy. But when you look at, in studying and working with, unfortunately, mass casualty situations around the world for many years, typically you'll find people that when they engage in a behavior that doesn't serve them, it's usually a thinking system, or what I call drinking buddies, a very aggressive thinking system and a hurt thinking system that take over, and they basically hijack the bus of the person's behavior. And guess what? Bad things happen.
Yeah.
And so when you say that kids are lost, imagine you have, like the movie Inside Out. It's kind of akin to that in a way, where they're driving and they're like, mom and dad said I have to drive on this road. I have no idea where I'm going. Don't know. If I don't know where I'm going, I sure as heck don't know why I want to get there. And I'm wondering why I'm lost. There must be something wrong with me. No. And when I see those cases, or when I advise therapists or sit in on consultations or therapies with therapists, I'll simply say, I think I figured out what's going on. Not to get too technical here, but the diagnosis, if I were to offer one, would be you're human. I'd be just as frustrated. So let's get clear on what do you enjoy doing,
Right.
and the why you enjoy it. And I think that there are some parents where they wanted their kids to be doctors and lawyers and firefighters or whatever, and they say, I really love doing this, and they do it with all of them. All their thinking systems are in alignment. Shit. And when
Yeah.
you see that happen, there's no better feeling.
I just think that kids don't get, especially now, like that are like 14, 15, 16, what their true happiness is, because parents say these kids are so addicted to their friends and they let because that's they are addicted to
It's
their
their
friends
tribe.
right now. It is their tribe.
every every what I call psychographic as we evolve, we look at the dating myself, and this goes back to the book called The Fourth Turning, if you've ever heard of
Mhm.
that, and then a new book out now as well. And there was like the Great Generation that was all about, well, before the Great Generation, and you look at the Roaring Twenties, it was all about partying and footloose and fancy free and speakeasies and so on. And then what happened? The Great Depression, and another thinking system of what we call the level 4, the blue or DQ, wherever you've learned, if any of you are familiar with these technologies, that stepped in of we've got to have our act together. And that's where we're not going to spend with reckless abandon. They made it through the Great Depression, and they thought, all right, now that it's over, I want my kids to have what? Everything I didn't have. And you look at Happy Days, you look at all the fun, and everything was crazy. And these are obviously the boomers. And then they had their kids, my generation, Gen Xers, and the 60s and the 70s. And so my generation, by and large, and there's always a bell curve, grew up without the rules and the structures and the discipline or the guardrails, as you were just talking about. And then we had our kids. And then a lot of them, if we didn't have the rules and structures, we didn't know how to help them. And we saw behaviors that were getting them in trouble, or we can't control them. And we thought, oh my gosh, my kid, and it's so easy to go and label people ADD, ADHD, bipolar, or what have you. And again, there are very valid cases of these. Please understand, but sometimes it's so easy to say, here's the behavior. We think the child is the behavior, and let's pharmacologically sedate this behavior. And while we may get them to quote calm down, we're basically retarding, not in the horrible slang sense of the word, it's like a fire retardant. We're squelching that personality that has the drive, that has the curiosity. If I want to, what can I do to innovate or add value or have fun or do whatever? And now, granted, they're stable, but now they're just kind of like little zombies. And I see a lot of
Right.
parents going, am I a good mom or a good dad? And the question's always, were you acting in the best interest of your child?
Right.
Well, yeah. Well, then first of all, then you're a good mom or a good dad. Let's see if we can get you connected with a therapist that has learned a lot of these newer technologies. And I've seen a lot of, again, unless you're a licensed medical provider, you're not able to tell anybody to start or stop any medications. But I've also seen, like, one of my top students and a dear friend of mine, he cut a psychotropic prescription rate on a military base by 95% within a year.
Wow.
95 for psychotropics. So there are traditional medicines we need, obviously, and I'm all for that. But saying, hey, I'm all for psychotropics if these other things don't work. And one of
Correct.
his young patients went in and said, doctor, we'll call him Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith, you got done in 2 or 3 sessions what I haven't been able to do. I can't believe it was that easy. And simply taking a different approach. I think parents need to look at, let me understand before we label, because when we diagnose people or give them a label of they're this or they are that, it's really for our own certainty. And like when,
Right.
again, I heard this mother say, here's my son Nathan, and he's bipolar. I said, okay, let's take the label, put it aside. I know it gives you the certainty. Let's understand who Nathan is. And all
Right.
of this Nathan had, and literally I remember saying, I said, stop laying on your back when you're reading your spelling words. And they're looking at me like, how'd you know? I said, because when he's lying down, he's looking at his words, and his eyes are going down into his kinesthetics. So he's trying to absorb something in the kinesthetics, but to try to spell kinesthetically is very, very difficult. I said, so take your spelling words, put them on an index card, sit here, and some people are reverse organized, but traditionally people are what's called normally organized. And on the left-hand side, as you look up, see the word, and just go card after card after card, flip them to the blank side, and have your mom say, spell this word, and 9 times out of 10, they'll spell it just like that because they're in that visual recall modality. That right there, in a matter of minutes, undoes years of therapy and training and sometimes even medication. it's a huge difference.
Right. So, and I love that there's different systems that how the brain works so they can pick up things. And I think it's just important for one of the most important things that I'm getting from this conversation from you, Steve, is that not putting labels on your kids, because
Yeah.
it really sets them up to fail. And I even say that, like, don't say your kid's good or bad, because they're not good or bad. It's an
They're your
experience they're
kids.
having. There's
Yeah.
another, and I use your example again that I learned from you years ago. So when he says he trains people, just so my audience knows, he's one of the people that have helped teach me what I know, that I can do my job the way I do. It's, I tell these kids that I'm working with is that everything you're going to is just a dot. It's
Yep.
just a dot. And the last day when God says you're going to take your last breath, you're going to look at all these dots put together, and it's going to make a beautiful picture, which you're going to call your life. You're
Yeah.
not going to remember what emotion was attached to it. You're not going to remember how much you spent in that dot. It's just a dot. And you're just going to see it all. So just
Can I
have the experience.
can I add on to your dot metaphor? And I'm totally going to take
Absolutely.
this from you now. So here's the dot, and that's a melody symbol. I'm just simply saying before you judge it, and I say this because everything that happens is a key on a piano, on a keyboard. Sometimes we have the high notes, sometimes we have the low notes, and at the end of our lives, we look back. What was the melody of my life? So
Right.
sometimes we think that our life has to be perfect and wonderful. It's like the Legos song or whatever. I think is awesome. Not always. I mean, you look at what we all go through. I mean, we're human. I put my underwear on the same way you all do. We do it that way. And again, I lost my house to a construction defect, and I spent all these years in federal court battling low notes, high notes of again, really helping people, helping situations. Get into situations where again mass casualties that are low notes, but then seeing able to where we're training churches how to go out and basically reach their community in different ways. So these highs and lows, you're never going to be all high. You're never going to be all low. There's going to be that melody. And when we talk about being at cause, when something happens, and can I draw that one diagram of the effect?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
But here's kind of the Rosetta Stone when I help communities in challenge, especially whether it's there are murder cases or what have you. That essentially, and I'll give you the high level version of it here. If let's say here's a person, events happen outside of us, and
Mm,
these events come in to our nervous system through what we see visually, obviously, what we hear auditorily through our hearing, what we feel kinesthetically, what we smell olfactory, and what we taste gustatorially. And it's coming in at the rate of 2 to 4 million bits per second. That's fast. Now, when it comes into our nervous system, it forms our IR, our internal representation. How do we internally represent the outside world? I know today, with again this unfortunate shooting on the East Coast, that people are like, oh my God, the world's going to hell. And we'll talk about how we filter and generalize and so on. And so, can we say that the world's going to hell? Look what's happening in the Middle East. Thousands of people that have just been horrifically massacred over there. Look what happened domestically. We could say the world's going to hell. But I
right.
also know that there are so many little babies that were born today. There are so many couples that have reconnected today. There are so many people that were laughing and giggling and loving each other. Can we also say the world is a beautiful place? Yes. Well, which is it? Is it awful or is it great? And it's not just whatever meaning we choose. More specifically, it's how we internally represent that outside world, because the data that we focus on comes in at the rate of 134 bits per second. So we're going from 2 to 4 million down to only 134, and we do that by either deleting, distorting, or generalizing. So in a nutshell, if you're saying, well, my life is horrible because all these things that have happened in my childhood or my jobs or my exes, if I'm focusing on this over here, this is my world, and what I'm deleting is over here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Or when we generalize, women are, white people are, black people are, Asians are, Republicans are, Democrats are. We generalize that. Or we distort it. We make things much bigger than they are to fit our what? Back to what we originally were talking about, so that it fits our identity of who we think we are. I'm a good mom, I'm a bad mom, I'm a great business owner, I'm a horrible business owner. This right here is what really changes how we show up, the identity that we hold for ourselves. And then obviously, which I won't go into too much detail here, this impacts our state. This is, are we happy, are we sad? What also impacts our state is our physiology, how we use our body. Are we breathing enough? Are we exercising enough? I have a little rebounder over here every time before I teach a class or I do an interview, or even in a tough situation, instead of having to fly around the world, I can now be here in my studio and help people remotely. And I can basically, I'll always change my physiology first, make sure that I have a ton and tons of water here, because I have to make sure that my physiology is working so that my mind works. Why? Simple. Because our mind and our body, our mind and our body affect each other. And if we're not careful, our mind and our body can, our mind and our body can also infect each other. And we all know this, because how many times have you talked to a loved one or a relative and you say, Aunt Sally, how's Uncle Harold? And oh my God. And all of a sudden people are looking at you like, what are you doing asking that? Especially at like a holiday party coming up. It's like you flip the switch and they're like, okay, we're going to be here for 9 minutes. We can all mouth the words because we hear it every year about how awful he was and how hurt she was. Why? Because when we ask the question, here's what happens. We focus on our memories, and that we light that up in our neurology, and that becomes our internal representation. And what we see, we feel, and what we feel, we basically see. It gets self-replicating, and then that's going to determine what. Let's look at this over here. That's going to determine the action we take or don't take, or our behaviors, and that's going to ultimately determine to what? Our results. So people, I can tell you, people don't come to me saying, Steve, I'm getting really crappy results. Why? Because I'm really not taking the right actions. I'm really taking some pretty bad behaviors. Why? Because I'm in a pretty lousy state. Why? Oh, I'm overcarbing myself. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm out partying too much. I'm drinking too much. Oh, and my IR inside my head, I'm taking all the good things that I did and I delete them out of my mind because I think I'm a piece of garbage. So therefore, all the wins, all the good stuff, when I'm focusing on the bad stuff, I'm getting rid of all of this. And guess what? My life sucks because I'm looking at all the sucky things that have happened.
Right.
And I'm not saying we've ever done this to our kids. If we look for how our kid is going to be, quote, a brat, or how she's going to be lazy, or how they're going to be this, we hold an identity for them.
Exactly.
We need, as you said earlier, we need to hold the space for them to be whoever they are. And I'll end with this, just on this one particular diagram here, which got really messy really quick. Sorry about that. Is that we need to realize that at the end of the day, there is just a really big equation here. This is where, and I'll go with this to really emphasize it here, you can either be at cause, where you choose what things mean. You choose, okay, this happened, how do I want to respond to it? Or you can choose to be at the effect. And I'd venture to say about 97% of the world is at the effect. And math majors, you can rejoice because I know it's 3% over here, live at cause. And so, again, when something happens, like I'm rebuilding my house, I have a spray foam rig outside. I had some what's called isocyanate lines that froze up, like $6,000 of hoses shot. And it was like, that kind of stinks. And immediately I asked these 4 questions of, okay, what really happened? Well, I didn't follow the instructions to make sure that I purge these things every 2 weeks. Okay, that's what happened. What did I need to learn from that? And so this is, again, these 4 questions. If you're listening to this, I see there are people from all over the world. Wow. Please write this down. If you remember nothing else from this other than, choose your own identity, the first thing is the 4 questions of what happened, not what the meaning you gave it, what actually happened. And then second question is, what do I need to learn from this? And learnings have 3 qualities. They must be positive, not like, I'm a piece of garbage. No, positive about yourself. Not I learned that they should have done. No, I learned that I need to be more attentive to the instructions provided by the manufacturer. In my case, this is just a few hours ago. And then about the future. So positive about yourself and about the future. So I talked to my team and I said, okay, guys, you know what? I did a dumb, as my friend Keith Cunningham says, I paid the dumb tax. It's 100% me. I could maybe blame somebody else. Well, you should have done it or what? No, it's my ship. It's my rig. I should have been responsible for this. And so I make sure then that question number 4, how can I share this? And I said, hey guys, I want you guys to learn from what I did, because that's how we get better. And I can say that when you have young people that beat themselves up, here's what it is. They think that, please put this in your notes, they think that their results are who they are, that it's part of their identity. I'm dumb. I'm not this. I'm not that. I'm a stutterer. I'm dyslexic. I'm this or that. No, it's a matter of you are Johnny. You are Jane. You whatever age. You want to look and say, okay, how can I go and take these events? Like if I were to say, Veenu, if I say this is a glass, even though it's water in it. If I were to say, here's a glass, and I put orange juice in it, and I say, Veenu, what is this? Most people would say it's what? It's just orange juice. But no, it's a glass full of orange juice, just like a cup. It's an event full of a meaning. Our nervous system, our identity helps determine the meaning we give to the events. If something doesn't work well, and I have the identity of I'm a loser, I'm going to be looking at going, see, another reference why I'm a loser. The world's out to get me. I don't even want to bother to try, teenagers. I didn't want to bother to try because I just can't win. Look at the degrees everyone else is getting. Look at the upbringing everyone else, and we'll find reasons to justify where we are. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge that many people face. They don't even realize it.
So you've said so much, and there's a couple of, I think this is amazing. I was like, yeah, give me more. I'm sitting here taking notes, so it's been great. So, one of the things that I've always said to parents, because, I'll be working with a family and they'll be like, my kid's just lazy. I said, stop telling them that, because their brain needs to be right. So it won't lie to itself. So every time it gets outside of lazy, it says, wait, don't forget you're supposed to be lazy. So stay in bed, or don't do your homework, or stay away from that because you have to be lazy, because it doesn't want to lie to itself.
Yeah, totally. Can I?
Yeah, I know. I see your face, Steve, and you're like, oh wait, I want to say something. Go ahead.
I know. So I only get to teach like once or twice a year because I'm busy using this in my daily life and helping. Really, I got to the point years ago where I wanted to train the trainers to help other people. So it's nice to actually be doing this on a larger scale. Imagine here, you guys can see the white screen, I hope.
Yep.
So imagine here, a lot of times, and sometimes when you're looking at your child, and I don't know how many of you that are watching are parents versus just kids, but we all have other people in our lives, so this works really for everybody. So if we look at this big, and no, we're not doing math before you start hunkering down or convulsing, this is what I call my neurostrategy framework. And so if we were to go and identify segments, and I'll just very quickly go over, this is what we call segment A. And segment A is where life is going well. Basically, I can handle what life gives me. For those of you more technically inclined, we say our mind capacities can handle our life conditions. We are basically comfortable. And by the way, please write this down. Comfort is like crack. It kills your drive. Most people, they don't really, we all want to be comfortable, but it kills our drive to be more. It has nothing to do with income or achievement. It's just to grow as individuals. And we also just do everything to avoid pain. As long as I can avoid pain, I'm comfortable over here. And I live a very busy life, like a bug to a flame, avoiding the flame, avoiding the pain, but I'm not really going anywhere. I'm just kind of, driving every day on the little comfortable freeway over and over again. We want to get clear on where we want to go. So coming up, we're getting there, is at a certain point, we hit point B. This is ruh-roh, something happened. A change in our geopolitical environment, a change in interest rates, a change in our job status, a change in our health. Something changes here.
Or for a kid, just to bring some context to this for parents.
Yeah.
This is your kid, a change in their friendship, a change in their school, a change in, anything that's happened in puberty, like in their hormonal change.
And by the way, as a parent, you're like, oh, God, I remember that was so easy. And we inadvertently gaslight our own kids.
Right.
It's like what's easy for you because you have many more years of experiences to draw from and learn from. I had a young man who said, my best friend said, I don't want to play with you anymore. I don't like you anymore. Out of the blue. And it devastated him. And his mom was like, oh my gosh, like, why in the world would this kid do this? And and so on. And literally, we'll call him Johnny. And Johnny was like, at one point, why? Because his identity is I'm Johnny and I'm friends with Sam, let's say. And when it's almost like a divorce for kids. Like when their best friend leaves or says, I don't want to play with you anymore, or you're a poopy head or whatever, part of them feels like it's been robbed from them. And you're like, dude, get a new friend.
Right.
It's not that simple. That makes sense. And so when we're in that segment, this is where many people, it can be a rapid decline or a pretty slow decline down to point D. And point D is basically, for many people, they would define it almost as, the seventh ring of hell. It's just like this, I've hit what? Rock bottom. It can't get any worse, but I'm worried it might be. And for some people, to your point, if they don't see what we call a compelling future,
right,
they'll think that, remember, we just talked about earlier that when you're focusing on the problem, when you're focusing on this, you're deleting all the good.
right.
When young people, unfortunately, when young people kill themselves, I went to help a community where a high schooler passed, and everyone thought it's due to suicide, and other people thought, oh my God, if they can't cope with what's going on, and suicides oftentimes in communities start to almost like dominoes.
Right.
And it came out that after like 6 or 7 kids had passed, the original student, they passed due to a genetic heart defect. And you're like, oh my gosh, what happened to all these kids? Because the people who they look up to, again, as parents, you are your kids' role models, whether you like it or not. You will be a role model of what to do, or I think as my friend Tony Robbins says, you'll be a lesson or a blessing or a warning for them. And so when kids do this is where they oftentimes will say, I got to do enough. Whoa, wrong color. I got to do enough just to get out of this pain. And they're literally, it goes, they go around and around and they burn themselves out. How can I be liked? How can I be loved? How can I keep from being unliked? How can I keep from being unloved? There's a difference, because when you're wanting to be unloved, this is what they're worried about. When you want to be loved or liked, that's part of the compelling future. And so parents realizing that, okay, I need to help my young person understand what's the compelling future, but also giving them strategies that are easily winnable, and then helping them get back to where we'll call it out of the problem. And this is E, this is now F. So F is where you're thinking they're back to normal. And we see a lot of times where if you have a child that is always seeming to have drama, and either they're reacting at home or at school, they get in trouble and then they get out of trouble, they think, oh, I'm good again. But the challenge is they're not really doing great. They're just back to being comfortable again. It's like we've been working with couples, ma'am, how's it going? Oh, we're doing great. Awesome. How do you know? Well, because he's not hitting me anymore, which means that we're
good.
We're looking at happiness on the pain scale. Like, no, what's this over here? And most people, I'd venture to say, especially with young people, most people, the compelling future is either a dream or it's like, it's possible, but it's not for me. And the reason why is because everybody has, and goes back to your initial topic here, everybody has an identity.
Right.
And if your identity is I perform at this level, when you get into pain, that creates an amount of energy. And likewise, especially with kids, when they're, let's say, doing really well, I'll get back to this one in a second here. When they're doing really well, let's say they're starting to achieve something, this is where a lot of kids, they'll start to do really well, and either somebody else will shoot them down, either because they don't feel they can do it themselves. It's in Australia, we call it the tall poppy syndrome. Or it's because, no, don't do that. You might get hurt. Why don't you just calm down? Just be like everyone else. Just go get a job. Just go do what everyone else is doing. And when I work with a lot of veterans, when they come back from service and so on, I was working with the lieutenant colonel yesterday, and helping them look at how do we take service members. I remember back that initial diagram that I had, not just get them any job. Let's get them a job that really fits with their personality. Otherwise, we get them a job that they think they want, but it's the exact opposite of their personality, and they'll be miserable and go, oh my gosh, see, I just can't cope. No, it has nothing to do with them. It happens to be, are they in their sweet spot?
Right.
As it relates to this diagram here, this is where if kids are doing too too well, they'll say what? This is too good to be
True.
true.
Hmm.
Or what they're really saying is, this is too good to be consistent with my identity.
Right.
And this is where you'll see from a behavioral perspective, this is where you'll have fear and anxiety. And if the identity shifts, this will be excitement.
Right.
If the identity is still down here, they're going to actually get what? Anxious as well. Why? Because you're going to think it's not going to last. I'm going to come right back down, and it could even be worse. And then they stop. And for me, and again, and I've seen this around the world. So, but try it on. It's like shopping. Try it on, see if it fits. Is for many people, when they look at what they really want, there'll be this barrier. And this barrier in the neurosciences field, we call it the critical faculty. Um, we also call it the what? Limiting belief system. And we all tell ourselves, or we tell our kids, the what? I call it the graffiti on the wall, the story. Here's why you can't do that. Everyone knows, generalization, everyone knows women can't do this, white people can't do this, black people, and we'll find some reason to change our identity and limit ourselves.
Right.
And so this is where helping young people get clear for them, what's their compelling future, and then what's the strategy on how they can get there.
So how do
Because
so
go
Steve,
ahead.
how do you help a child that's 10, 12, 14, 16 figure out what their compelling future is?
Simple. Number one, the compelling features, as far as I know, the only thing etched in stone was our tombstone. That usually happens after we're, as my friend Joseph says, taking a dirt nap. So essentially, that compelling features can change. Remember, I thought I wanted to be an architect. Then I thought, here I was, a principal of engineering, a VP, a chief information officer for a financial services firm. I thought that was my compelling future, and I realized it paid really well, but it didn't make me happy. What I do now, obviously, is what makes me truly happy. And so it changes over time. And people think, well, I have to have the certainty in this. I say this because when they say, I want to be a pilot, a doctor, or let's say if they want to be, if they vacillate, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a doctor. What are those two things, Veenu? What do they have in common?
Service.
Service, helping people. One might have a little more adventure. One might be more analytical. So remember the doctor versus the firefighter? If we go back over to somewhere, that was my beautiful note over there. So the firefighter would be what? Truly helping people, and again, also in helping understand in terms of either yourself or your child. And again, we're not here to diagnose anybody, but basically, are they going more above the line here with their intuition? Or are they going more with their sensory? Basically, are we looking at, okay, understanding, having our ear to the ground of what's going on, or going with our gut? And then also, are they, I was going to use this one over here, are they more extroverted in terms of this side of the line, or are they more introverted?
Right.
That side of the line. And so when this happens, this is where a lot of times people can see, where do I feel the most comfortable? And there are different jobs typically that are more adept or they're more appropriate. However, case in point, a dear friend of mine runs a large accounting firm in Australia. And he's this amazing accountant. And you think, oh my gosh, well, he must be the systems person. He actually tests out as what? Is just a big lover, a big hugger of people. Why? Because he uses his accounting to help people. Does that make sense? So we got to be careful that parents and even as individuals, we don't go labeling ourselves, well, this is my personality, I have to do this. We have to check and see, does it make us happy? So when you're helping young people, it's really, for parents especially, listening. And if you think, well, they should really do this, they're really good at it, that's great, and hold on to that thought. But help basically elicit that from your child and look at, say, if you could do anything, again, if it all paid the same, some countries that's pretty much the case. If it all paid the same, what would make you the most happy? And they may end up going and doing one thing because they think it makes them happy at this stage of their life. And at another stage, it may shift. And different research will say that people change whole careers about anywhere from 4 to 7 times throughout their life.
That's great.
And
So we're
I know for me,
about out of time, Steve. This has been
yeah, oh,
so amazing. I'm going to have to bring you back on again because I feel like
yeah,
there's still so much more to tell parents. And
that's okay.
it's like you've given like a whole week's class in 50 minutes. So I
What have been
that.
50 Oh, wow.
But it's been
Yep,
so great because it really comes down to that cause and effect. Like when we're looking
yeah,
at your kids aren't broken, we don't need to fix them. If
exactly.
you
It
go back and listen to all of this and really hear what Steve has been talking about, it's just amazing. We're always trying to, even as adults, we're trying to solve our identity,
yeah,
so we can give our kids a different perspective by allowing them to be who they truly are and coming to us with that and having that open, safe, and trusting space of a conversation with them to really help them prosper. Steve, is there any last golden nugget you want to give our listeners?
I think it's also kind of in this point, I guess your viewers here is look at who you surround yourself with and who your kids surround yourself with, and really teaching them. There's an old saying I use, which is show me the people you spend your time with, and I'll show you your life. I left Wall Street because I didn't like the people that I was hanging out with, even though it was everything that I thought I wanted. Being around people of service and so on, it's my happy place. So I think really looking at helping your kids surround themselves with good people that have the same values and morals that are core to your kid's identity, and have it to where they look at it lifting each other up, not trying to beat each other.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And as I always say, be curious and not critical. Thank you,
Yep.
Steve, again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all next week.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Redefine Parenting with Veenu Keller. Follow her on Instagram at Veenu Inspires. To learn more about Veenu, as well as download her free ebook now, go to www.veenuinspires.com. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it.